Hey, greetings and salutations. I've been out tinkering away with this thing. Looks a lot better with a bumper on it, doesn't it? I was out in the trailer where I've got most of the parts stored for this, and I was digging out some of the interior parts. Oh, it's so dirty in there. And while I was rummaging around inside that trailer, I've known this for some time, but I have a gas-powered roll air compressor in my trailer, and I've had that for a long dang time. And it's nice to have a gas-powered backup, just in the event that that thing ever craps the bed. I've got a gasoline-powered portable air compressor that really performs as well as that one does as a backup. So I'm in there, and it's been a long time since I started that thing. I unburied it and opened up the gas cap, and oh Lord, the stench that came out of that gas tank. I really wish I'd have got the camera out and showed you this a little while ago. This is the little screen. It's actually cleaned up a little bit, but that's what the inside of my gas tank looks like. And at first blush, that looks like rust, but it's not. That's just the sediment. That's what happens to gas when it goes bad. It turns into a thick, gooey sludge. Consistency of roofing tar. Oh, it's probably about that deep in the bottom. Let me give you a little backstory on this air compressor. This particular unit's an 8-horse Honda industrial engine, 2-stage roll air pump. This air compressor will pump up to 120 psi in about 45 seconds. This is the third roll air compressor that I've owned. I had a 5.5 horse wheelbarrow type like this. It had a single wheel in the front, and that's what I used for the majority of my pole barn career. I bought that in '92, and I sold that in 2012. I made a bunch of modifications to it, but it lasted a long time, and it worked just fine when I sold it. I have the original engine on a little air compressor that I built for off-road use. If I can find that video series, I'll put it up here. Well, to make a long story long, that 5.5 horse roll air compressor that I had, I went to go check the oil, and oil started coming out of the thing. So I figured something was broke, and at this time the compressor was, what, 10 years old anyway. This was about 2002 when I did this. So I figured out it's probably time for a new engine anyway. So I went and bought a new engine, put a new engine on it. After I got that put back together, I decided to see if I could figure out what was wrong with the original engine. Turns out the float stuck, and I just filled the crankcase up with gas because I didn't turn this fuel shutoff right here on the carburetor. I'd never turn that off. After that, I made it a point to always turn these things off while the engine was running. So at the end of the day, you come over here, you turn the fuel shutoff off, let the engine run, and run all the gasoline out of the carburetor, and then you would never have an issue with sediment in the carburetor. Well, about 2010, I tried to sell this for $750. That's a $1,500 compressor. Even to this day, $1,500 brand new. I couldn't get anybody to bite on that, so I'm gonna keep it. A few months ago, I noticed that that gas tank, oh my gosh, that gas tank stunk to high hell, and I thought, I'm gonna have to get a new gas tank. So I went online and I looked, you know, 20 or 30 bucks, and if it's not rusty, I thought I'll try to clean this first. First thing I did was I grabbed a handful of 3/4 inch nuts and bolts, and I put it in a gas tank, and I put about half a gallon of gas in it. That did very little, you know, fresh gas. That did very little to loosen up the crud that was in there. So I just went down to Tractor Supply and picked up a gallon of lacquer thinner. Poured half of that in there with a handful of nuts and bolts. That seems to be working a little bit better. We'll try that. We'll give it a day or two and see how it looks after a couple of days. That's what the gas cap looks like. It's not rusty. It's just really gummy. If this doesn't work, then I'll probably go to something a little more aggressive, like maybe acetone. And if the acetone doesn't work, then I'll probably go to muriatic acid and just really clean the shit out of it. The last bus video I did, I drained the oil out of that and I collected it all. The amount of oil that came out of that engine was somewhere between 7.5 and 8 gallons. The reason I say so is because I had that 5-gallon bucket, that 2.5 gallon bucket. But, you know, when you go to the store and get an oil, do an oil change, you buy 5 quarts, you know, in a 5-quart container. I had one of those that had, I don't know, maybe a couple quarts in it, and then I put probably another half a gallon in it. Anyway, so I know I had at least 7.5 gallons plus a couple quarts probably. So probably about 8 gallons. That engine holds 22 quarts. 8 gallons is 32 quarts. So I had 10 quarts more oil than was supposed to be, and I know I didn't add 2.5 gallons of oil to the engine. The only thing that I added oil to was the power steering. Friday I took it out and I actually drove it around the block. And I haven't checked the oil yet. Well, why don't I do that right now? It was right on the full mark when I fired it up the other day. Let's see if it is fuller. A little bit over the full mark, but we'll see. Jury's still out. I put 2 gallons of oil in the power steering reservoir and I didn't even fill it up. So anyway, I got all this oil to get rid of, and I've been running this now for 2 days, and that's my homemade oil furnace. All it is cast iron pot that was here when I moved here, and then a couple of pieces of, I think that's 4-inch Schedule 40. I drilled 1/2-inch holes in, and a couple of derelict propane tanks welded together. Another piece of Schedule 40. It might be Schedule 80. I don't know, you tell me. I think it's Schedule 40. All I do is turn that to get the oil to flow. I'll light this, stick it in there just to get the oil burning, and once it's burning, it's good to go. There's plenty of videos on how to do one of these. But you can see how clean it's burning. And brother, that thing gets hot. I was going to try to probably use this to heat my garage. I never finished it. Anyway, motor oil, transmission fluid, gear oil, power steering fluid, hydraulic oil, all goes in there. So if you have small engines that don't get used a lot, probably the best thing that you could do is only put enough gas in it that you're going to need to perform the task at hand. And all the gas that we get here in southern Nevada comes from California. It's all California blend. It's all got ethanol in it. Ethanol is kind of hard on rubber parts, like in carburetors and stuff like that, gas lines. If you have a small engine that starts to run erratic, won't idle, runs really rough, replace the gas lines. Take the carburetor bowl off and clean the carburetor out, and replace the gas line. Odds are that ethanol is attacking the rubber fuel line, and little pieces of rubber are getting inside the fuel line and plugging the jets. So replace the fuel lines. If you can get ethanol-free gas, get ethanol-free gas. And then if you're going to leave that gas in your gas tank for an extended period of time, make sure you use something like Sta-Bil or some kind of fuel stabilizer to keep it from doing what happened to my compressor gas tank. And it's probably a good habit just to turn the gas valve off while the engine's running and letting the fuel that's in the carburetor burn off, so that you don't have any fuel standing inside the carburetor to plug up the internal workings of your carburetor. Do those things and you'll probably avoid what I'm having to deal with right now with my air compressor gas tank. But a few days, hopefully it'll be right as rain, and I'll fire it up and maybe do an oil change on that too while I'm at it. It's been a minute. So that's all I got today. Just a brief little video on how to avoid dicking up your small engine gas tank with bad gas. I hate bad gas. Bad gas smell good. And an update on how much oil I took out of the bus and what I do with my motor oil. Now, if you live in a major metropolis, you're probably not going to be able to do something like that. It's burning really clean right now. You can see that thing just roaring away, and there's no smoke at all coming out of it. But it takes a minute for it to get up to temperature, and while it's getting up to temperature, it rolls coal.
The next morning.
It's the next day. I want to see what this looks like now. Nice. Oh, nice, man. No, it's not rusty. It just really, you can see that sludge down in there. The fuel pickup. Right there. That was about 1/4 of an inch deep on the bottom. So I got this tub full of lacquer thinner here. I think I'll go fire up the waste oil furnace, burn off another batch of oil. Let me show you how you get this thing started. I usually just start this by turning on the oil flow from the tank. Just sticking a torch down there and it'll start. But you can do this with diesel fuel, gasoline, any volatile, flammable liquid. And this just speeds up the process. Once this gets warmed up a little bit, now I'll turn on the oil. And that's all there is to it. So I hope that little video was informative. If you thought it was, go ahead and hammer away at that like button. If you thought it sucked, do the other one. Either way is okay with me. Down underneath this window is a red button. If you haven't done so yet, it says subscribe. Click on that red button and it turns a different color. It's no longer red. And then right next to it is a little picture of a bell. Hit that bell icon and you'll be notified of future uploads. It's just that easy. Share this video with your vast social media network if you're so inclined. So until next time, you have fun, stay safe, shoot straight, keep your powder dry, have a splendid day.